Hi, welcome to Deep Six, the Deep State. I think I mentioned yesterday that we had quite a breakthrough. Facebook has decided to list our show as a show on a list of shows that they're offering on Facebook, videos. Facebook is now launching its own video channel called Watch, and we may be the only political show on it, or Newt's and mine may be. And that's really great. And there'll be a heart-shaped app that you can get, or something you can click on the bottom of your screen that's heart-shaped that gives you the list of the videos. And that's pretty good. And eventually this will be, you can say you saw the Bill O'Reilly show when it was just beginning on Facebook, only it'll be Deep Six, the Deep State. There is now unbelievable conclusive evidence that there is no collusion between Trump and Putin. What more do you need? The station chief of the CIA in Moscow, who retired yesterday after 5 years on the job under Obama and under Trump, says that there was no collusion. I mean, for God's sakes, what more do you need than that? Daniel Hoffman, CIA Moscow station chief, who retired after 5 years in February, sorry, not yesterday, said, quote, "No evidence of anyone actually colluding with the Russians has come to my attention." The NPR interviewer interviewed him, and he said, "Overall, I haven't seen any evidence of anyone actually colluding with the Russians, of Russian intelligence colluding with the campaign. He had no cause to suspect that there was anything of that sort going on." Well, for goodness sakes, we're talking here about the head of the FBI, of the CIA. If he didn't see it, who did? Obviously nobody. And what do you have a special prosecutor over here investigating whether it happened or not, when the head of the spy agency, who's supposed to know that stuff, says definitively it did not happen, or at least he saw no evidence of any collusion. And of course he would have. Heck of a station chief if it could go on under his nose. Once again, the whole point is that when Trump saw that, when Obama saw that Trump was going to win the Republican nomination, his people and Hillary's people hired this guy to come up with this phony dossier implicating Trump in colluding with Putin. And then when nobody published it, they caused it to be released, and then they caused leak after leak after leak to come out substantiating this ridiculous storyline. Let me just explain that, because I'm not sure I have as well as I've done it on other occasions. When Obama took office, the first thing he did was to make sure that the deep state wouldn't screw him. He's the first black president, he's a liberal, he's a leftist, and the agency that usually hunts down leftists is the FBI. And the one that usually goes abroad hunting down leftist regimes and overthrowing them, that's called the CIA. So here he takes over, and the first thing he has to do is to make sure that those agencies are on his side. And he can't convince the existing people of that, so he appoints Brennan to head the CIA, and Holder, Attorney General, and Comey, FBI. Brennan is so liberal that in 1980 he said he voted for the Communist Party candidate for president because Carter wasn't liberal enough for him. And they went to work firing everybody. There were reorganizations, anyone involved in any Gitmo or any interrogations or any accusations of torture or waterboarding or anything like that was out on their ear. And their place was taken by a whole battery of sycophantic leftists who would follow Brennan and follow Holder and follow Comey. And over an 8-year period, that kind of a purge happened. At one point, there was a total reorganization of the CIA, and the purpose of it was simply to move people into new slots so that they could get their people in there. Well, when it became clear that Trump was going to be president after he, in a surprise, won the election, Brennan and Comey and Holder, and probably with Obama's blessing, told their people, go underground, don't quit, don't leave your jobs, stay at your desk. In fact, 1,000 of them were moved from political jobs where their tenure would be dependent on the president's approval or the director's approval to civil service jobs where they couldn't be released, couldn't be fired, couldn't be transferred. And they told them to burrow down in there, and you're the resistance. You stay there and you leak when Trump comes in. And let these leaks be to destabilize, demoralize, and disgrace the president. And they worked like hell at doing that, all on the theme of the Russian collusion. And that's what's been going on. And it's worked very well. It's led to the special prosecutor. And when we say leaks, this isn't like leaking, just like Stephanopoulos used to dump on me all the time and say Morris is on his way out or whatever, wishful thinking. But, it never amounted to much. These are leaks calculated to destroy. And they're phony intelligence saying phone calls that they claim happened didn't happen and that didn't happen did and all of that stuff. And here the CIA chief says this stuff doesn't happen, but the special prosecutor keeps roaring on looking for it. It's a little bit like the Loch Ness Monster. Mm-hmm. Nobody's seen it. Nobody has any evidence it exists, but they're investigating it.
Dick, why haven't there been more leftovers let go, and what is your opinion of McMaster, as Rachel Gaskins wants to know?
Rachel, more leftovers let go is that they were all embedded in civil service positions. It'll take a long time and cause and hearings and all that to get them fired. And also that the Democrats, while the Republicans control the Senate, and you only need a majority to confirm any of Trump's appointments, no longer 2/3, they put in all kinds of procedural delays and McConnell wasn't aggressive in clearing them, to a point where Trump has had only about 80 approvals, and Obama at this time had over 400. And that was the other reason. And the other part of that, I'm sorry.
What do you think of McMaster?
McMaster. Yeah, well, what's happened is that all of the Trump loyalists have been thrown out. They've been thrown out by when they got General. I'm sorry, the FBI, the one who was going to go in as director of intelligence, and he was sidelined by the charge. Michael Flynn. He was sidelined by charges that he'd spoken to the Russians. Jeff Sessions has to recuse himself as Attorney General. And when they put McMaster in instead of Flynn, it was really essentially putting in a deep state operative instead of a Trump guy. And McMaster has gone around firing everybody he can find for being too loyal to the Trump agenda. There's a guy named Higgins who wrote a memo that I quoted yesterday where he laid out new priorities and disagreed with McMaster and reflected Trump's priorities, and he's gone. And increasingly, it's being run by those guys. When I started to work for Clinton, I came in really in the third year of his 8 years. And at that point, Tony Lake, the National Security Advisor, and Warren Christopher, the Secretary of State, they were the deep state, and they were running foreign policy. And at one point, I taunted Clinton. We were that close. I said, you're not 21 yet, so you can't run your own foreign policy. So there's a regency, and Lake and Christopher run it for you. But when you get to be 21, you can take it over yourself. And he bristled at that, but it was a big theme with us to recapture control of foreign policy from the permanent government. And that was how we were decisive in intervening in Bosnia and Kosovo, because we wouldn't let them we wouldn't let the permanent government make those decisions. We insisted on making them. And Trump has not done that. And McMaster is pulling in very much the other direction. Any other at this point?
Yes,
yeah.
We have some coming through. Is there any truth to the Department of Justice offering the Clintons a deal over new findings? Peter Farrington asks.
Yeah, Peter Farrington asks, essentially, if Ed Klein's report, and I trust Klein completely, is accurate, that the Justice Department is considering, has not yet, offering Hillary a plea deal where she pleads guilty to certain crimes and there's no risk of going to jail. I think that's conceivable, and I certainly take as credible that they're evaluating that. Remember that the new emails have surfaced in connection with Benghazi, and there's lots of new information coming out, and new emails of the ones she deleted, and that all could be used to reopen the investigation.
Hey, Dick, who can fire Rosenstein? Olga Kaminsky asks.
Olga Kaminsky asks, who can fire Rosenstein? Trump can fire him easily, and Sessions can fire him. The problem is, would they get the replacement confirmed by the Senate? And that's kind of going after the capillary. We need to go after the jugular. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Charleston and how it relates to all of this. You have to start with Charleston with understanding that this was not a situation where a cop killed a kid and the kid's dead, and was the cop justified or not, and the city's torn up and everybody's going crazy over it. This is not a fight we had to have. This is not something where events forced themselves upon us and the local jurisdiction had to adjudicate it one way or the other. This is a situation where somebody decided to tear down these statues after 165 years, for God's sakes. And they decided to do it now when racial tensions are peaking and at their height. And they triggered a backlash from the white crazies, the Ku Klux Klan and the Nazis and the skinheads, who were just looking for an excuse to act out. And the Black Lives Matter and the anti-FA, A-N-T-I-F-A, anti-fascists, the left-wing extremists reacted, and we had a street war, just like in Germany in the 30s, the communists against the Nazis. And that's the style of both of these groups. And they both loved it. It was great for membership and for publicity. But why did it come up now? I believe that it relates to the left trying to get rid of Steve Bannon. Bannon, who I know personally, is never a racist, not a racist bone in his body. He's absolutely not a white supremacist. It's absurd. And but yet Bannon has, because Breitbart doesn't censor, and he was the head of Breitbart, ran some articles that maybe the New York Times wouldn't have allowed to see the light of day. And therefore they said he's a white supremacist. Completely unfair and untrue. So I think that the left decided to use that to get rid of Steve Bannon. And I believe that the left ginned up these destruction of monuments, the decisions by the municipalities to destroy the monuments or take them down, knowing that that would provoke a reaction from the skinheads and knowing that that would create a huge national controversy and a focus on the alt-right, as they say it, the white supremacists, to try to discredit the Trump supporters in general and Bannon in particular. And that's my suspicion of what's going on here. Because otherwise, why would you take down the monuments? What difference does it make? Who's talked about it? It's not like a Confederate flag, where there's been an effort to remove them from the Georgia state flag and the Arkansas flag and so on. That's different. I mean, that's hanging in your face every single day. You pledge allegiance to it. You salute it. That's very different. But a monument, a statue that's gathering spider webs on a lawn someplace, it's absurd for that to be an issue. And I think it's part of the Obama policy. They have tried to inject racial tensions at every possible juncture. And whenever the black turnout sagged and we began to become a genuinely biracial society, they're there with an agenda point. Can you ask people if they've been arrested when you're applying for a job? Do you have enough affirmative action policies in place? Do you have enough black admissions? Everything, are you discriminating against blacks by photo ID? Everything designed to stimulate the race card, playing it just as surely as George Wallace and the racists did from the other point of view in the 1950s and 60s. You know, Bob Dylan, who I love, wrote this song in the 60s, "He's only a pawn in their game." And that's what I think you're looking at now. So they're going to go city by city by city and take these monuments down, and we'll have a civil war on our hands over some statue. And you look at the history of the violence of this group, anti-FA, A-N-T-I-F-A, anti-FA fascist, which is a group that really goes back to the 20s when the communists had groups like that. And the record is astonishing. One video has and one of their activists urinating on protesters. Another, an event interrupted by violence. Another with a bike smashed over a man's head. Threats of violence to shut down the Rose Day Parade in California. A riot in Portland on May Day. Attacked by protesters with bricks, bottles, etc. Man gets attacked at an anti-Sharia protest. These are the actions of fascists, Nazis, and communists who try to agitate and use that to win support and eliminate the moderates. If it's a choice between the skinheads and the black militants, on the other hand, the Panthers or the skinheads, moderates have no place to go, and that's their long-term goal. There's a post in Communist Party law which is called Mini Agitprop, Minister of Agitation and Propaganda, and that's what you're looking at here.
Dick, how do you feel about the way President Trump is being treated during the Charlottesville tragedy compared to Obama's treatment during all of the Black Lives Matter incidences? Frank Beerfan asks.
Yeah, Frank Beerfan was asking about just the thing I was talking about. How do we compare the way Obama was treated during all of these racial incidents and how Trump is being treated now? And the answer is the presumption of guilt was that the cops were guilty and the community was right. Even when there was videos that showed that that was not the case, that was the presumption. And here the presumption is that somehow Trump is allied with these crazies who are going around as white supremacists. It's an old tactic. It's designed to discredit the moderates and to make the pro-Black Panther types appear to be the only reasonable guys in town.
And Dick, why did all the IRS people who were fired get hired back on? Meredith Pace Champion asks.
Meredith Pace Champion asks, why did all the IRS people who were fired get hired back on? What's her name?
I'm sorry,
Meredith, right?
Yeah.
Meredith,
Champion.
I don't think a lot were fired. I think a few were punished, a handful. You're talking about the IRS scandal where they targeted conservative groups. And I don't think many were fired. Lois Lerner wasn't even fired. She retired. And I think then, obviously, many of them had civil service protection. But that brings up an interesting point. I believe that the civil service unions, public employee unions, should not be allowed to organize IRS employees, just like they're not allowed to organize the FBI or the U.S. Army or the Customs Service because of their quasi-judicial function. And you should not have a labor union controlling that aspect of our regulatory structure.
Isn't leaking confidential information akin to treason? Daryl Bryan wants to know.
Daryl Bryan wants to know the equation between leaking confidential info and treason. Of course, confidential is one thing, classified is another. And leaking classified information is a violation of law. It's actually not treason, it's the Espionage Act, but it's the same kind of thing. And yeah, it is. And that's why I believe those leaks by Mueller and his people should be investigated by a special prosecutor and Mueller thrown on the defensive. One of the things I learned working for Clinton is that when you got a special prosecutor on your case, it's basically a presidential race. Bill Clinton versus Ken Starr. And you got to treat it like that, with negatives on the other side and tripping the other side up. And now it's Mueller against Trump. And you've got to make him eat for breakfast every single one of those leaks. Do you remember the story in the last few days about Manafort's house being broken into by a SWAT team at 5 in the morning to seize evidence for Mueller? Okay, all of us know that. Do you think that Manafort had a press conference to announce that? Of course not. That came to the press illegitimately and illegally by a leak from the special prosecutor's office, which is a crime and may even be a disbarable offense. But yet it went out there, and we need a prosecutor to clean up behind that and go after them. Now, let's give Donald Trump some credit. He doesn't get any from the media. He just faced down North Korea. They blinked. We were supposed to wake up this morning and find out that Guam had been nuked by North Korea and that U.S. missiles had just obliterated North Korea and that there are 10 million or 20 million dead. That didn't happen. And it didn't happen, I believe, because Trump was very aggressive, very forceful, used non-diplomatic language, sound and fury, I think, fire and fury, I think he said, and really spoke to Kim the way Kim speaks to the world, and spoke to him in a language he could understand very easily. And I think because Trump did that, combined with McMaster talking about our nuclear arsenal, Mattis talking about our nuclear arsenal, and Tillerson talking about the need not to disturb the Korean Peninsula. But I think that the key intervention here was Trump, and we should give him credit for that. There was another situation just like this when Assad, the Syrian president, said he was going to use poison gas the next day against his opponents. And Trump warned of incredibly serious consequences if that happens. And Assad got scared and he backed off. And I think in this mano-a-mano diplomacy, Trump does very well. I don't know if I've said this before on the show, but if I haven't, it's too good not to repeat. Richard Nixon, when he was president, said the first job of the President of the United States of America was to convince the chairman of the Council of Ministers of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics that he's crazy. First job. Because they have to believe at some level that you're nuts enough to blow up the world and to use your nuclear deterrent. In fact, the doctrine of nuclear deterrence came to be called MAD, M-A-D, Mutually Assured Destruction. And you have to just convince them you're mad. And Trump's doing a pretty good job of that. Now, I'm sorry.
Kathy King says, Obama's thuggish street-fighting attitude attracts people. What is Obama's long-term objective? Do you know?
What is Obama's long-term objective in his thuggish street-fighting attitude? I think that as the black community moves up in the world, as its incomes increase, its social acceptance increases, and intermarriage dilutes the racial composition on both sides, which is a wonderful thing. I think the future of race relations is intermarriage, and I'm so delighted with that. I love, parenthetically, that when Willie Mays played in New York City, he was the black baseball player. But when Derek Jeter played, nobody ever mentioned his race. A black father, white mother, and he sort of was without a race. And that's how it should be for everybody. I believe that as that happens, the Democratic Party can lose its base because they're not going to win any election unless they take 100% of the black vote. And to win that, you need to keep the sense of grievance alive. You need to keep the chip on their shoulder and a feeling that they're being screwed, and that has to be front and center in order to motivate a turnout and to get them to overlook the poor job the Democrats do of meeting the needs of the black community and their plantation mentality of keep them poor, keep them in a group, and keep them voting Democrat. And you don't overlook that because your sense of racial grievance is so fanned by police brutality and by the reactions that flow from it. Now, there is going on right now in D.C. A systematic attempt to strip Donald Trump of all of his allies. It started, as I said, with Flynn being forced out as National Security Advisor, and then Sessions being sidelined. And now they're going after Steve Bannon. And they're doing it basically because he's one of the only guys on Trump's side. You know, Kirshner and Ivanka are on Trump's side. He's their father and father-in-law. But they're not ideologically motivated. They don't make a study of this stuff. And Trump in his campaign and so far in his presidency has articulated a bold new vision in American politics. It's not conservative. It's not liberal. It's American. If you think about it a little bit, one of the historical figures that I love to study was Charles de Gaulle in France. And he said, I'm not a left or right, I'm French. I speak for France. In fact, at one point he said, each party cooks its own little stew over its own little fire in its own little corner, and I speak for France. And the idea that there is a French interest or an American interest, which is more important than left or right, that the president needs to speak for, is a new insight in our politics, and a politics that had become increasingly polarized around economic theories. And Trump basically says, I know that as a conservative Republican, I should be in favor of open and free trade and no restrictions because I've read all the textbooks, but that doesn't work. That puts Americans out of a job. I'm going to be out there campaigning and fighting for American jobs. Or he says, I know that as a Republican, I should oppose the deficit, but we need to get stuff moving in this country, and I want a stimulus package. And he moves beyond ideology. And Bannon really is the person who essentially does that for him. I told Bannon once that, Angelo, Bundi Bundi, who was Muhammad Ali's corner man, the guy who came up with the line, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, you can't hit what you can't see. Well, he's like that. He's the corner man, reminding Trump of who he is, where he comes from, what his ideology is, and how his novel approach differs from the normal established wisdom in Washington. Washington is like a black hole. One of the reasons I've never lived there is you're incapable of independent thought. The gravitational pull of the conventional wisdom on both the left and the right is so intense that no light can escape it. It's a black hole. And Bannon is one of the ones letting light in, and Trump is going to be forced to get rid of him, and he should not. Now, right now there are 800,000 people who have been granted immunity under the DACA Act, the DREAM Act. And just to review, these are people who came here as minors, as children, in the company of their parents who were illegal immigrants. And they have lived in the United States all of their life, never lived anyplace else. And Obama, for years, said he couldn't deal with their plight because only Congress could. And then when he ran for re-election, he discovered that maybe he'd put those principles aside. And the Democrats passed a law which says these 800,000 people will not be deported, will not be prosecuted for being here illegally, will get green cards, will get the right to do everything but vote. They even can become attorneys. And now there's been a challenge to this law in the courts, and Texas is threatening to sue to overturn the law, and there's pressure on Trump to rule on this by early September. Now, my view on this is, as often it is, right the best of each side, triangulation. I think that the right wing, is absolutely correct that the president cannot change the law and permit people to get green cards when they're here illegally. Green cards are voted by Congress. They're an act of Congress. There are documents set up by Congress, and the president does not have that authority. On the other hand, I agree with the left that these people should not be deported. They have no other home. They have no other country to go to. It was not their fault that they came here illegally, and they should be granted legal status. I also believe that they should not be the anchors to bring their whole family here. That's if you're a citizen and you're born here, you could do that, but otherwise I think that is going too far. So I believe that what the court should do and what Trump should do is to say we're not going to deport them, but they do not have the right to get a green card or to do all kinds of other stuff because that is not conferred by the president, it's conferred by Congress. And I think that's an appropriate resolution of it. Now, Obama didn't say they wouldn't be deported. He couldn't give them legal status. All he did was he directed the ICE to put their cases at the bottom of the file. of the pile so that they wouldn't reach them, and they would, in fact, could be protected against deportation. And I think the protection should be made more explicit and more legal in that category.
Dick, Kathy Armistead wants to know, are you a proponent of the New World Order?
No, I'm a strong opponent of the New World Order. The New World Order assumes that all nations are created equal. One nation, one vote, like in the UN General Assembly. First, I wrote a whole book on this called Here Come the Black Helicopters. Eileen and I wrote it. First of all, 60% of the UN votes are cast by dictatorships. So who does Russia vote for? One man, Vladimir Putin. Who does China vote for? One man or a small group, the Politburo. And to equate that vote with Britain or the United States, where they're voting for a democracy with hundreds of millions of people, I think is wrong, and I think it's fundamentally unjust. I also believe that the majority of the UN votes are cast by tiny countries. Micronesia is in the UN, so it has one vote, and the United States has one vote. It's insane. If I did this exercise, if you count the smallest countries in the world, by the time you get up to 51% of the countries, you're at a population of about 30 million. And many of these countries are smaller than most of our cities. And it's okay for them to be a country, but not to have equal vote. I also believe that the One World folks essentially believe in planning, socialism, government planning, because that's the heritage of the left that they take into that discussion. And I think that never works. And I think that it is a device to overcome individual initiative and individual entrepreneurship. So I'm basically against it. Now, this video is sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. Very interesting. A record number of fund managers told the Wall Street Journal, told Business Insider this week, that they believe stocks are overvalued. 46% said that. Previously, only 39 had. There's a sense that stocks are overvalued. And if you're depending on the market to protect your retirement savings, it's like depending on the ice in the middle of the summer. You're going to fall through. And gold and silver are, of course, the safe havens that you can use. Now, there was a very interesting study that I read today. They have something called the VIX, the Volatility Index. The higher the VIX goes, the more people are frightened. The lower it goes, the more they're secure and happy. And as the VIX rose under Obama, and people became more and more unsure, gold and silver did not increase. You'd think they would because they're safe havens, but they didn't. But under Obama, they are. They're going up as insecurity increases. I'm not sure why, but it's a demonstrable trend. And I think that we have to realize that, look at North Korea. We live in a very unstable world, and you don't want one crisis to throw your retirement into jeopardy. So what I've done is to take a portion of my portfolio and put it in a place where nobody can touch it, and it can't erode because of inflation or the collapse in the markets, but is in safe metals. So go to the patriotgoldgroup.com or call the number on the screen, 800-476-5675.
Dick, Carol Orr wants to know, and people have asked this in other videos as well, what is your opinion on the microchip? Companies are having people...
implanted.
Yeah, implanted, yes.
Yeah, very, very, very dangerous. I think that it could be very, very serious. It begs the larger question, which is that very soon, perhaps within 10 years, Google and other companies will develop the capability to implant microchips in your brain, which is essentially like a search engine in your brain. You will know everything Google knows. You won't know that you know it, but you will know it. So if I say to you, please recite Act 3 of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, and you've never seen it, you've never read it, certainly haven't memorized it, you'll blurt it out right like that. You'll know it. One possibility is a GPS microchip in your brain, which means that you would know where you are all the time. Even though you'd never seen where you are, you would recognize it and you would know it and you would know how to go.
Wow.
And those are not far away. In fact, I would say that probably 70% of the people watching this will actually live in that era. And that's a very dangerous era. There's the potential for control. I told you yesterday about the danger of 23andMe, a company founded by the wife of Google, Brennan, which you can send them your DNA. You just spit in a tube, and they send you back all kinds of neat stuff about what you're susceptible to, what you're not, and traits that you have. It's like a fortune teller on steroids. But the problem is that they're amassing genetic information on you, and they're going to have a data bank which gives everyone's genome information, which could be horrible. I mean, you go to apply for a job, and somewhere in a computer it says that you have a risk of Alzheimer's disease, or a likelihood of pancreatic cancer, or a likelihood of Parkinson's disease. You're never going to get that job. And we know that protection of confidentiality is a sometimes thing. So I'm very concerned about that. Now, the California state legislature has just passed a law requiring every city in California to offer sanctuary protection to illegal immigrants. And the rationale for that was the dumbest thing I've heard lately, and it's got some pretty good competition. The state attorney general, Xavier Becerra, argued in a lawsuit that the Justice Department's threat to cut off funding to sanctuary cities undermines public safety and violates the Constitution. First of all, I'm not sure there's constitutional rights for someone who's here illegally. He said it's a low blow to our men and women who wear the badge for the federal government to threaten their crime-fighting resources in order to force them to do the work of the federal government. We're in the best position to determine how to enforce the law and keep our people safe. What he means by that is that if they enforce sanctuary cities and that they really go after people who are here illegally, they won't cooperate with the police, they won't talk to them, they won't identify who they saw around a crime scene, and so on. And that only if there is no danger of someone being arrested and deported will they open up to the cops. And there may be some justice in that. But that is not what sanctuary cities is about. Sanctuary cities is about illegal immigrants who have committed violent crimes and are in jail for doing that in federal prison. I told you that 1/3 of the inmates of federal prison are illegal immigrants, a stat that Obama refused to develop and Trump ordered counted and came to that conclusion. 1/3. So when these guys are released from federal or state custody, the sanctuary city stuff requires that you have a cop right there from the ICE who takes him into custody and deports him. Otherwise, he goes free on the street. And to say that it's going to enhance public safety by letting this guy go free on the street is outrageous. It's a total distortion of the fundamental purpose of the Sanctuary Cities Act. I told you a couple weeks ago the story of this Haitian guy who came here illegally 20 years ago, and he committed a murder. And they convicted him and they sentenced him to 17 years on parole for a related gun charge, but they let him go after 17 years. They turned him over to the ICE to deport him to Haiti. Haiti wouldn't take him, and ICE let him go in the streets. He committed a parole violation. They arrested him again, put him in jail, released him on parole, and ICE deported him, and Haiti wouldn't take him, and he went back out on the streets. This happened a third time, but this time he killed somebody while he was out, and he was arrested, charged with murder, and is now serving a life sentence. That woman would have been alive if instead ICE had forced Haiti to take him, and that's part of what we need to do. But under sanctuary cities, they wouldn't be there at the door to catch this guy. He'd go right out in the street. So how can the Attorney General of California say it's a blow to public safety to keep those folks off the street?
Anita Jean Church Adams asked earlier on in your video, will we get to see the emails, Hillary's emails?
Will we get to see Hillary's emails? Yeah, I think you eventually will. I don't think you have to worry they won't live long enough. I think eventually you will. But those emails have not all been processed. The State Department is taking its good, sweet time to do that. I don't know why. I don't know why Trump wants them the next day. There are parts of this government where you wonder if Trump is the president or not. And increasingly, he's not. Increasingly, the deep state operatives are controlling these decisions, the bureaucracy at a lower level. I want to close by telling you a story. Did I say this before? I don't know. When Memorial Day of 1995 came around, I wrote a speech for Bill Clinton and when I worked for him as president. And he and I had talked a lot about the axis of evil, which was the phrase Bush used, but we talked about this as rogue states, funny in view of my book being Rogue Spooks. And we wanted to declare Iran, North Korea, Sudan, Libya, and Iraq rogue states. And that was a new concept in foreign policy. So I wrote a speech for that, gave it to Clinton. He loved it. And then God came down from the National Security Council with his tablets from Mount Sinai and said, you can't give this speech because speeches for Memorial Day and on this topic need to be written by the National Security Council, and you butt out. And I said, but this is what the president wants. And they said, I don't care what the president wants. You butt out, we control this, this is our turf, and if we need your help, we'll ask for it. And I went to Clinton, I said, what you going to do? He said, butt out. He said, fundamentally, he didn't want to take him on and didn't want to challenge him. That's the kind of deep state we're talking about. So listen, my new book, I'm sorry.
We still have to announce the contest winner.
My new book, Rogue Spooks, The Intelligence War on Donald Trump, is out today, first day. And please go on Amazon or Barnes & Nobles and order it, because we have to know how this coup d'etat is happening. We have to know how it's unfolding. You need to know the details of how the FBI and the CIA have been worked over to make them tools of the extreme left. You have to see the moves Mueller is going to take and see the counter moves that Trump needs to take. So please get the book. It's out there right now, and I'm hanging and living on every piece of data as to how the sales are coming. Now, we asked a question, which was, which American president never held elective office or appointed office in the military? And the answer is Donald Trump. He's the first one. Everybody else who was not a politician was a general, like Grant or Eisenhower or Washington, and they held military office. He's the first one not to hold either. And the winner is Brandon Althaus,
Yes.
Althaus. And Brandon, we will send you a copy, a signed copy of Rogue Spooks, is this the right way now?
Yes, it is.
Rogue Spooks, The Intelligence War on Donald Trump. But really, folks, if you're listening to this broadcast, you need this book. It's like the libretto. You'll keep understanding what I'm saying and what's going on. And please pick it up. You can order it today, at last.
And Dick, can you think of a contest question to post for tomorrow?
Okay, in light of the monument controversy, which Southern Civil War general founded the Ku Klux Klan?
Excellent.
Most of the Southern generals followed Robert E. Lee, who did not agitate, did not get involved in stuff, accepted their defeat, and went back to civilian life. But one general didn't. He gave incendiary speeches throughout the South and worked very hard at stimulating the racist resistance that led to the Ku Klux Klan. Who was he?
Now, guys, when you answer the question, write contest in big letters, capital letters, and the first one with the correct answer wins. And we'll announce it tomorrow.
Good. Thanks a lot, folks. We'll see you again.